Hello world, my name is Daniel Marnie Elkins and you are watching Talk About It, the show in which we talk about the opioid epidemic and discuss all the different ways to destigmatize and educate people about this issue in our communities. And I am here today with a good friend, a colleague, and someone I look up to in the world of prevention. MJ, why don't you introduce yourself to the people?
Good morning, my name is MJ Scales. I'm an associate scientist at the University of Delaware, Center for Drug and Health Studies, and part of my research is to look at the factors, both risk and protective factors around substance use and mental health.
So you may notice today we are outside. It was just such a beautiful day that we said we should have this conversation out in the community. And there's also a point to that as well, because prevention is something that has to take place in the community. You can't do it from within an office space, although there are people who sit in office spaces who help us do the work in the community. And those people are sometimes called epidemiologists, researchers, evaluators, a title in which you have had at various different stages of your career. So could you tell the people what it is you actually do at the Center for Drug and Health Studies?
Absolutely. I first and foremost have the privilege of talking to people who are actually in the field doing the work. As Mr. Elkins mentioned, prevention is there's a space for everyone in prevention, and my role primarily is that of an evaluator and epidemiologist. In other words, I study data and the way people respond to risk and protective factors in order to better understand substance use, behaviors related to substance use, and how we can prevent adverse outcomes.
So why does data matter?
Well, I think you said it in the beginning, right? It's to have the conversation. The best place to start with prevention is having the conversation. And those conversations need to be informed. They need to be informed by facts. And part of what we do is we ask questions. We ask questions of people who are thinking about substance use, people who have engaged in substance use, people who have substance use that occurs in their family. We ask questions, we study that information, and we use data to better inform policies and decision making at all levels.
So what role does data play in evidence-based practices?
So that's a great question. I think there are a lot of norms and ideas that are misled from a place of everybody's doing drugs, or everybody is drinking alcohol, or I have no choice, my doctor prescribed this thing. And that's not true. What we find when we ask people about substance use is the majority of people are not engaging in harmful substance use. The majority of young people are not using drugs. And so it's important to get those facts out there to reduce some of the pressure that other peers put on each other to do drugs, to experiment, and say, no, actually most people aren't doing that, both young people and adults. And so the data challenges those norms. And we know that from another perspective, we know that everyone is at risk of problematic use. So it's not a particular type of person. We see higher rates with different groups of people, but everyone is at risk of substance use. Everyone can face those challenges, and I think it's important when we talk about stigma to understand that this can be anyone, anywhere.
So what role does data play in evidence-based practices?
So that's a great question. So I think a lot of times people have a really good intention. They have a really good idea. And so they just go ready to get in and do the work, which is great. It's great to have that passion. But if we don't know what works, a lot of times we're wasting resources, wasting our time, and we get discouraged when things don't work. Versus if we collect that data and ask those questions, then we're a little bit set up for success, or a better place to be effective and to be efficient. So for example, if you are integrating a program, but it meets on a night where a lot of parents have back to school night or parental obligations, and we don't ask people, what's the best day of the week? We get frustrated because nobody's coming to our program. We get frustrated because nobody wants to engage with us, or we may feel like nobody cares. When in reality, if we had just asked through a survey, through a questionnaire, and found out, No, if you switch it to Thursdays, we'll be here. So those are the kind of things that when it comes to data and evidence-based practice, asking those questions so that folks can make informed decisions, and the actions that we take are more in line with the need as opposed to what we just think it might be.
So surveys play an important role in this field. You are an expert in the how to evaluate surveys that are coming back in. What are some of the steps that people should know about when designing surveys? Or is there an official process? Can I just go out and start knocking on people's doors? Or if I want my survey data to be valid and then acceptable on all sorts of levels, are there things that I need to be aware of or processes that I need to do?
Right, so that's a great question. And I don't know that I'm necessarily an expert. I'm still certainly a student, and I get an opportunity to learn from some really great people at the university. There is a gentleman by the name of George Baer who is considered a leader in survey design and analysis and those types of instruments. But what I would say is that the first caveat is that no survey is going to take the place of a good conversation, right? We can collect a lot of data and we can say that this is what works at the population level, but it's really important to continue to have those relationships and nurture those connections with people one-to-one. That being said, surveys are a great way to get information from large groups of people when we want to know what works on a bigger scale. Right? So when we design surveys, there are some key things to remember. What do you want to know? Because oftentimes we ask questions and then when I look back, I say, well, how's that going to get us where we want to go? How is that going to get us what we need to be more efficient and effective at our work? Are we asking because it's important to know, or are we asking just to ask? Are we filling space? That's a waste of our time, and it's also a waste of our participants' time as well. It's important. There are some, good survey design, not asking what are called double-barreled questions, in the sense, do you like peanut butter and jelly or turkey and cheese? Yes. Well, what are you saying yes to? Are you saying yes to peanut butter and jelly, or are you saying yes to turkey and cheese?
So what I'm hearing you say is that asking the right question is the key to an efficient survey.
Yes. The great part about surveys is that it allows us to hear directly from people. The importance of data and evaluation is that we don't have to guess. We don't have to guess what people are thinking. We don't have to guess what they might do. We hear directly from people what works, what are they doing, what do they need, and what helps. And so surveys are a great way to get that information, and it's authentic and real information. Now, people can still lie, but for the most part, there are ways to reduce the prevalence of bad data, so to speak.
When it comes to finding out information about what's going on with our youth, what are the ways that Delaware or the Center for Drug and Health Studies used to try and find out, like, what is the past 30-day use of marijuana? Like, what are there instruments and tools? And I know, but I'm asking for the benefit of our audience out here.
So what I would say is that we have University of Delaware Center for Drug and Health Studies partners with the Division of Public Health, Division of Substance Abuse and Mental Health, and some other partners to administer surveys in public schools here in Delaware. And these are voluntary surveys. That's an important part to making sure that you have good data, that people know that they can choose not to answer questions, that they can choose not to participate if they don't want to, and to see the value of that data. So those surveys are administered in public schools. One instrument is administered in middle school and high school, and another instrument is 5th, 8th, and 11th. And one of those instruments is really great. It's called the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. It allows us to compare what's happening in Delaware with other states. So if everybody's asking the same question, have you consumed marijuana or cannabis in the last 30 days? We can compare that to Rhode Island and California and South Dakota and get a better sense of what Delaware is doing right and where we can grow a little bit and where are the opportunities. Another one is the Delaware School Survey, which allows us to see change over time between 5th, 8th, and 11th. And so we are privileged to work with our school partners to get those in front of students and get more information back.
So the landscape of prevention, especially when it comes and concerns laws, when it comes to laws and concerns the way substances are regulated is constantly evolving and changing. Just recently here in Delaware, there has been a change concerning cannabis and THC just this last week, I believe, right? So how does the field of the science of prevention adapt to those changes?
Well, I think we have to understand that it's a nuanced experience, right? Regardless of, you and I are both adults. We're legally able to consume alcohol, and our doctors and public health officials would recommend that we do that in moderation and in safe ways by not driving or operating heavy machinery and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, these substances are dangerous for developing minds, and that's important to recognize. As an adult, I can make a choice, but it's also important to recognize that developing minds need as much information and nutrients and the opportunities to thrive so that they can be set up for successful adulthoods. And when we start mixing in other things, whether that is toxic stress, whether that is substance use and things, we put some barriers in place to successful development. And so I think the importance of the law, and I'm not a lawyer, but what I would say is that the data is important in understanding how those things manifest across the different groups. So for example, as an adult, as I mentioned, I'm legally able to consume alcohol, but were I to become pregnant, that would be dangerous, right? So it's important to give people the information and the education they need to make those informed choices.
I remember seeing the change in methodologies of how they interacted with youth, from sitting in an auditorium in middle school with someone attempting to say that if you tried this substance that you would die, or playing us these videos that just showed absolutely insane things, to a approach that then focuses on the positive interactions that one can have with youth. In your opinion, what is the most effective type of intervention that we can do in sort of in the space?
So a number of years ago, I attended the Philadelphia Opioid Summit. This was before the pandemic. And the deputy director of behavioral health at the time said, we've got to stop chasing substances and start chasing people. Whether we're talking about prevention or current use or recovery, the reality is that these things, we heal and we grow in community, and we, in isolation, we make poor decisions. We are at risk for adverse outcomes. And so I would say, and the data supports that. So not in addition to surveys, but also focus groups that we've done with young people, conversations that we've had with young people. They're hungry for information. They're hungry for education. They need to feel supported. Regardless of their circumstance, they want to know that people care. And they know, we've all been teens before, and we know when people authentically care about us and when they're just phoning it in. And sometimes when we get a little older, we forget that. We forget, well, if I just show up, right? And part of it is showing up, but part of it is authentically caring about other people so that they can feel that. And so whether that's through objective measurements like data, or whether that's just good practice, it's important.
And I think that sort of brings us almost a full circle, that when talking about surveys, you said there's an importance in getting this higher level information, but then it's also just important to have a good conversation.
Yeah.
Which is why we are here to talk about it.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining Talk About It. Thank you for being with us today. If people want to know more about the Center for Drug and Health Studies, where do they go?
Yeah, so you can Google University of Delaware Center for Drug and Health Studies, or CDHS, and we'd be happy to support you in your prevention efforts, or just learn a little bit more and have just a conversation. It doesn't have to be anything official. We can just talk.
Talk about it.